Hello, good people. Welcome once again to another video in our series on Matplotlib. And I believe at this point we have covered most of the basic things that you need to know about Matplotlib, and we are going to smoothly transition into intermediate steps and then learn how to do further customization and do more advanced things up until the point where we get to doing animations with Matplotlib. So this video is going to help us learn about subplot in Matplotlib. And basically what subplots do is it helps you to create plots that span across multiple grid cells. So you create a grid cell, and it's good that we have a grid in this graph right here. And by the way, I don't mean the grid you are seeing in the graph. I'm just using it for an example. So if I take the first two rows, this is row 1, row 2, column 1, column 2, 3, 4, 5, and then 6. And so Matplotlib makes it possible for us to create a grid of graphs or a grid of plots, and then we are able to indicate to Matplotlib into which cell we want it to place. Which plot or graph. Okay, so let me just write a code so that it's easier for you to understand. The first thing you need to do is to call plt.subplot. Okay, and then you begin by indicating the number of rows, the number of columns, and then the target index of the cell. So as you can see here, the function, I mean the signature we are going to use is the one that specifies the number of rows, number of columns, and then the index. And these are keyword arguments, so we are not going to supply any one of them yet, just yet. Okay, so I want to plot the three graphs that we had. Okay, the three functions that we plotted in the previous video, we plotted them on one plot, but in this we want to put each one of them on a subplot. So each function or each graph, each figure is going to be on its own plot. Okay, so what's going to happen is we're going to say we want it to be on as one row, three columns, and then we are targeting the first cell. That is why it is 131. So we want um, the subplot to be one row, three columns, and the next call to the PLT functions should be targeting the first grid. Okay, the first cell in the grid. Okay, so I'll say PLT dot plot. Let's plot our x and then the y linear, and then I'm going to keep to what we had, and I'll say label is equal to linear. Okay, and then you can come down and then you say plt dot subplot. We say 1 3 and then the second cell, and then I'll do plt dot plot. I'm going to plot x, I'm going to plot y quadratic, and for this I'm going to keep it at our red dashes, and the label is going to be quadratic, and then I would say plt.subplot 1 3 3. So basically you specify the same number of columns, number of rows, number of columns, and then the third index is your target cell in the grid where you want to plot. Then I will come and I will say plt.plot. I'm going to plot x, and then I'll plot a y cubic, and I want this to be our blue caret, and the label is going to be cubic, and then now we should be able to call plt.show, and what's going to happen is we have three different um, figures on three different plots. Okay, so if you look at what we had over here, we plotted two different figures on one plot because we didn't use subplot. So we just called plt.plot, and then we submitted the data that we wanted to plot on. So it's did all it drew the figures on one plot. Okay, it's the same for what we had up here. We drew three figures on one plot, but down here we are giving each figure a subplot. and we do so by specifying the number of rows, the number of columns, and then our target cell. So this whole thing here is one row, and then the first column, second column, third column. And the way we specify that is when we call plt.subplot, the index is going to specify our target plot where we want the next figure to be drawn. Okay, so subplot 131 means draw. Any call to plt.plot should be applying to plot 1. Okay, the figure should be drawn on plot 1. So up until the point we call the subplot function again and specify another target, all calls to plt.plot will apply to the target that we have set in the first call to plt.subplot. So basically, ladies and gentlemen, this is how we are able to plot multiple figures on basically their own plot. And I did this on purpose. I called plt.legend, and you can see that it only shown it on the cubic. And the reason is, like I was telling you, all calls to functions on plt applies to your target cell. So if you wanted to show for each one of them, then after each plot function we need to do before we call subplot, so that now it gets to add the legend to each one of them. So every other function you have learned up until this point applies. And the key thing I want you to take from this is you call plt.subplot, you specify a number of rows, columns, and then your target cell. I mean, I can go ahead and then change this to a 2 by 2. So if I change this to a 2 by 2 grid, you will see the difference. What's going to happen is that there's not going to be any fourth cell, because we are only plotting 3 things, but this should give you an idea of what's going on. So we said plt.subplot 2 by 2, which means 2 rows, 2 columns, and then the first cell, which is here, I am plotting the linear function. Then the second cell, I'm plotting the quadratic. On the third, I am plotting the cubic. And if we like, we can plot something else on the fourth cell, but in this particular case, we are not plotting anything. But the whole idea is you are able to plot different figures on different plots, and that, ladies and gentlemen, is what Matplotlib means when it talks about subplotting. So thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.